Good morning, everybody. I just want to go through and break down for you a question that I get in my inbox all the time, which is, how is Justin Trudeau censoring the internet and what's happening next? I'm a Canadian member of Parliament, so it's really hard for me to even hear these words, which is that Justin Trudeau, the Liberal government, has imposed incredible censorship bills and laws on Canada. And it's at the point now where Canadians can't even see news on Facebook or Instagram. The news is actually blocked because of legislation that Justin Trudeau has put into effect. So I want to walk through very briefly how Justin Trudeau has censored the internet, but more importantly, what he's going to do next and what the Conservative Party is doing to try and fight that so that you're aware. Now, I want to give you two examples of why this is really important. So first of all, today, this is from Blacklock's Reporter. They're an Ottawa-based independent media news organization. They found out, it's just breaking news right now, that the terms of contracts have vanished off of government websites. And this might sound innocent, but it's actually that $24 billion worth of payments to COVID contractors have been removed from the government website. So Justin Trudeau, I think, is trying to censor the internet so that he can cover up for all of his spending scandals. He certainly makes my job really difficult as a member of Parliament to try and uncover these things. But he's really hell-bent on ensuring that you don't know what's happening. So let's break down what he's done to date, and then let's talk about what's happening next. But as I go into this, I want to make a strong appeal to you. Because Justin Trudeau's censorship bills have blocked news in Canada, it's very difficult for even mainstream media outlets, but certainly independent media or people like me, to get this information out to you. So there's two things you can do, and I'm going to remind you of it throughout this video. Number one, subscribe to this channel. That costs you nothing. And at least, and you'll see why as I explain this, at least you might be able to get notified when people like me come online. Also, if you have independent media that you follow, make sure you subscribe to them too, but it's very easy. So right now, just click subscribe to this channel, and also share this video. The second thing is, I know that it's not just Justin Trudeau. We know that like some social media platforms will upgrade and downgrade certain types of content. Sometimes they'll shadow ban it. This is why I started writing long-term content for you guys to digest. So when I find out about things like this, that I can deliver that directly to your inbox. So there's a link in the comment field. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's in the video description, that breaks down everything that I'm about to talk about. But click subscribe to that too. It's my newsletter. It's free for you, and it allows me to directly communicate with you because of these censorship bills. So let's get into it. So the first thing that Justin Trudeau did a few years ago was introduce a bill called C11, the Online Streaming Act. So Justin Trudeau came out and he said that this bill was supposed to like modernize Canada's Broadcasting Act. That sounds very innocuous, doesn't it? Oh, we're just going to modernize the Broadcasting Act. But what it actually did was regulate online streaming platforms. And the net effect of that is it gave the government the power to impose regulations that determine what you see on platforms like YouTube, other streaming platforms, meta platforms as well. So essentially what the Online Streaming Act did was it affects what you see online. But it's not just the platforms making that decision anymore, it's the government making that decision. And at the time, there was a lot of people that fought back across the political spectrum and said, no, this isn't right, for two reasons. First of all, this is government censorship, because when the government is selecting what you see, right, it makes an impact on the type of content that people will create or what type of news you would see in your feeds, right? So this bill, like, Conservatives fought this tooth and nail in the House of Commons and in the Senate for very many months. But of course, because the NDP props the Liberals up, it did pass. at the time, the other thing is the government says, oh, well, this won't affect individual content creators. Of course, it's not going to affect them. But the government, the Liberal government, they refused to put in an exemption for individual content creators. And what that means is that now with these rules, the Online Streaming Act, is that content creators, like, for example, I'm putting this out here today, the government can impose regulations on streaming platforms to say what can be seen and what shouldn't be seen and what should be upgraded and what should be downgraded. So it does impact discoverability, number one. And number two, it also impacts, it potentially could impact whether or not individual content creators have to individually, not just to streaming platforms, subscribe to these regulations and report to the government on these regulations as well. So there's this additional level of government intervention in somebody like me, or it doesn't matter. It's not just about politics or news channels. It could be about, online gaming streaming or makeup tips, right? This has been such a source of contention that recently American legislators are asking for a trade intervention, like intervention in international trade laws, because they feel that this bill is discriminatory. So it's not just inside Canada. This is actually becoming a global issue, this censorship piece of legislation. It's a huge problem. And it's why, again, I'm asking you to click subscribe to this channel, because at least then there's some fighting chance that you might be able to see my content. Because as these regulations go on stream, because they're so vague, we actually don't know how the government is going to control what you see. We don't know what that looks like. They've left, the government left so much outside of the definition in legislation purposely for this purpose. So click subscribe. But also, guys, I don't know how this is going to roll out over the next few years. This is why I'm doing long form written content and delivering it to your inbox for free. So click subscribe on the link that is in the comments. But again, this is something that affects individual content creators, and it does impact what you see online. So you might not realize it now, but that's really what the government has been doing. So the second piece of legislation that the government put forward, the second censorship bill, is Bill C-18, or the Online News Act. So this came, they tabled this and started debating it after the last bill that I talked about, Bill C-18. And this particularly focused on censoring the news. So the government will come out and they'll spin it and they'll be like, oh, this is to save mainstream media. But that it has actually had the exact opposite effect, which is what conservatives and actually people of all political stripe argued throughout the entire time this bill was being rammed through the House of Commons with the help of the Liberals' coalition partner, the NDP, the Socialist Party. So and again, I know this sounds crazy. It sounds like this couldn't happen in Canada, and that it sounds like a conspiracy theory, right? But it's not, because if you go onto, for example, Facebook platforms right now, and you try to search even the Canadian Broadcasting Company, so like, hardly a bastion of conservative thought here, if you're in Canada, you actually cannot see that news content on Facebook platforms. They have literally censored the news with this bill. But they've gone even further, right? So it's not just the immediate impact of you not being able to see the news on these platforms that this bill has impacted. There's something else that's actually much more insidious. We've all watched newspapers decline, right? As print media declined over the last decade because of the switch to online news. Essentially what's happened is new media creators and respected journalists, like long-time respected journalists, have said, look, this doesn't work. Let's try to create new platforms, right? So you see new media platforms being created on all sides of the political spectrum. You might even see them in your own community. There's some that are very apolitical. There are local news outlets. There are people that are trying to create independent local news coverage for like small town city councils, things like that. And the key way that these platforms were growing was by distributing their content on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, right? But what this bill C-18 did was, because the net effect was to ban news on platforms like Facebook, what happened to their growth? Well, it's pretty obvious. They stopped growing, right? So while those new media outlets were employing journalists, were creating revenue for Canadians who were investigating and researching politicians or, corrupt business practices, because Bill C-18 cut off their access to distribution platforms like Facebook and Instagram, they've stopped growing, and they can't get their content out to people like you, right? So there's actually a news article today. It's in the CBC, believe it or not, and it says that the headline is 1 year after the news ban, Canadian journalism is suffering. And it outlines a couple of people in the situation I just outlined for you, local media publishers who they can't grow, they can't get their word out. So that is the second head of Justin Trudeau's censorship beast, is Bill C-18, the online news ban. So that's what we're already living under. And this is why, again, I constantly remind you, click subscribe to this channel so you at least get alerts when I go live. But more importantly, also click on the link in the comments or in the video description so that you get this type of analysis from somebody like me, who my job is to hold the government to account. That's literally my job. That's why Canadians pay my salary. But I have to be able to get that information out. And Justin Trudeau has made it very hard. He's trying to prevent people from getting this type of information because it doesn't reflect well on their government, putting it mildly. They don't want their scandals to be found out by people like you, right? So click subscribe. Okay, so where are we going now? It does not stop here. So as Parliament resumes going into the fall session, the worst is yet to come, and I'm not making this up. There's a bill called Bill C-63, and it has this rather innocuous title. It's called the Combating Hate Speech Act. The type of censorship in this bill puts Bill C-18 and C-11, it makes it look like a walk in the park. This is, when I saw this table, I just had this sinking feeling in my heart because I knew what it meant. So just to briefly explain the politics of this bill, and then I'll get into the substance of what it does. When the Liberals announced this bill, they tried to make it seem like Canadians have to choose. There's a choice that you have to sacrifice your free speech, your charter rights to free speech in order to be safe from online violence. But the big lie about this bill is that it actually does nothing to protect people from online stalking or it does nothing to address enforcement or prevention of escalation of violence through online harassment. What it actually does is criminalize speech. So how does it do that? So what it does, and this is technical terms, but it reestablishes something called Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. That's essentially what it does. So over 10 years ago, under the previous Conservative government, and keep in mind, this is before Twitter, Facebook, Discord servers. This is before, the way that we consume media really changed. So over 10 years ago now, the former Conservative government abolished this part of the Canadian Human Rights Act because even lefty media outlets like the Toronto Star were speaking out against it and saying this is putting a chill on speech. And essentially what it did functionally is it allowed anybody to complain about anything that somebody said, and it would go to essentially a kangaroo court where it didn't function like a judiciary, a judicial process, an official judicial process. It was all arbitrated under the Canadian Human Rights Commission. And people were experiencing vexatious complaints. It was like if somebody had a contrary opinion and they wanted to put a letter to the editor in the newspaper at the time, or they wanted to put it on an email thread, somebody could complain that their human rights were being violated under this Section 13. That's essentially what it did in practice. And there were so many vexatious complaints that people stopped doing what? They just stopped speaking, right? And again, the reason why I say it's important to recognize that this is over a decade now is think about how we communicate has changed. virtually everything that we do is online to audiences, to people that we don't know, right? And also, this is before cancel culture, right? Cancel culture really sort of took off around 2015. And at that time, like that sort of, that type of woke lefty progressivism that seeks to divide people rather than bringing people of different political thought together to try and say like, okay, I'm going to hear what you have to say. I might not agree with it, but I'm assuming you're not trying to violate my human rights, or you're not trying to, condemn me. But that sort of like political bridging that we need more of today, that really was eroded under Justin Trudeau and his philosophy of government. So now you've got this media ecosystem where we're communicating online. It's much more divisive because of cancel culture. And now they're trying to reestablish this piece of legislation that had a chill on speech over a decade ago, before all of this happened. So what they're trying to do with this is essentially, they want the government to have control through an extrajudicial process. This isn't the judiciary. This isn't a court of law. They want government appointees to be able to determine what you can say. And what is that going to do to Canadian speech that's already, it's already seriously hampered under C11 or C18? It's going to chill it further, right? I can only imagine what a video like this would do under this legislation. I'm sure I'd have a million human rights complaints. Let's just be honest, right? Because I said things like cancel culture. We need to be able to explore these concepts. And if this bill passes, it's over, guys. It is completely over. And the government is setting up this, Justin Trudeau is setting up this false dichotomy. And why is he doing this? He's doing this because they want to be able to silence people that have opinions that are counter to their dogma. But in a democracy, you need to have, the whole point of a democracy is to challenge the government so that you have better public policy. I can't imagine, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do my job with this in place, right? Because I'm sure I'll be tied up in a million vexatious complaints. And I guarantee you will be too. I guarantee, like, if you said something to your neighbor that they could complain, that it would be, just think about this and think about the cost to the government. I asked the parliamentary budget officer to figure out how much this would cost. And last year they said it was over, like, or a couple of weeks ago, they found it at a minimum, it's going to be $200 million just to manage the administration, never mind the legal costs to people like you. And if you're sitting there thinking this could not happen to you, you are completely wrong. If you have an opinion that is offside and you've posted it on, and by offside, I mean like contrary to somebody else, anybody, and this isn't just, the right against a leftist government. If you're a leftist and you're watching this, there's nothing to stop somebody that's on the far right of the spectrum from complaining that you're violating their human rights. So long story short, this could impact you. You could be the one facing, legal challenges and uncertainty and smear to your reputation because somebody has decided to complain through this process, this extrajudicial process that the Liberals are putting in place. So it has to be stopped. It has to be stopped. I don't care how you vote. This is going to completely chill speech in Canada. So not only is the government now regulating what you see on YouTube and Facebook or any other platform through C11, and not only have they banned the news distribution on platforms like Facebook, they're now putting in place this kangaroo court by which any Canadian can complain about another Canadian, and they would have to go through this, like, essentially witch hunt on whether or not people's human rights have been violated. Making things worse, the person that the government has appointed to head the Human Rights Commission has had an enormous amount of controversy over the last couple of weeks. It's a guy named, I'm just looking up his name to get it right. I know his last name is Burju Detani. And he has made some extremely controversial bias statements. I just, for the sake of time, I won't get into all of that. That's the topic of another video. People from the Jewish community have argued that he's openly anti-Semitic. You know, that none of this has been proven in court, but these are the sorts of things that are being said. So so how can somebody who already has this controversy sort of swirling around him, how can he now arbitrate that level of power to determine what hate speech is? And hate speech is not clearly defined in Bill C-63. It's really not. That's part of the problem as well, too, is that it's so broad that maybe this could be determined as hate speech, right? So it probably would, frankly. I mean, I'm one of the top critics of the government. I'm sure they would like to silence me through this. But the reality is that the government shouldn't be looking at somebody like me or somebody like you who might have a contrary opinion to their policy as an adversary. They should be looking at it as like, well, maybe she has a point. Maybe this isn't the best legislation. That's how democracy was supposed to function, right? But the reality is what you have here is not democratic. This is not democratic in the least. This is a government through changing what you see online through regulations, through banning the news, and now putting a chill on speech through this process. Like, guys, that's not democratic. What does that look like? It does not look like a democracy to me. But because the Liberals have been clever, they've turned the temperature up gradually, right? Over the last several years on this. Canadians they kind of ignore it. They're like, oh, well, you know, maybe it's not the end of the world. Guys, this is so bad. This is so bad. Think about this. This morning, the government literally pulled $24 billion worth of COVID contracts off of their website, making it hard for me to scrutinize. And we know that there's all sorts of scandal we've uncovered all sorts of scandal with that already, right? There's this other Randy scandal. I could go on and on and on. The point is that our free speech and your ability to get the information that you need to hold the government to account and to come up with good public policy and to diffuse tension with your natures is under attack by this Liberal government. And I don't say that lightly. This is actually happening now. So if you care about this, I ask you to do 3 simple things. First, click subscribe to this channel. Click subscribe to this channel right now. Please, so at least there's some line of defense for me to be able to talk to you. And the second thing is, click subscribe to the newsletter. The link is in the comments or in the video description. It's free. It allows me to directly communicate with you outside of social media platforms, outside of these censorship bills, the ones that have passed to date. I don't know what's going to happen with C-63. The last thing that I need you to do is to share this video and share it with somebody who maybe doesn't have the same opinion as you, who might not have the same opinion as me as a conservative, because nobody should want any government, regardless of what their political stripe is, to have this type of power over speech, right? No, there should be, it doesn't matter if it's conservative, liberal, Marxist, whatever. Nobody should have this. Nobody should have this type of power over speech. It's antithetical to democracy. So share this video as well too. What is the Conservative Party going to do about C-63? That's a question many of you will be asking for right now. I have literally been working on a response for this now for months. The other reason why I want you to subscribe to this channel and to this newsletter is because, stay tuned, we have a strong response coming. I can't wait to share it with you. I'm really excited, but I'm going to need your support and your help as we fight this in the fall. Stay tuned. But in order to stay tuned, I need you to subscribe to this channel and to my newsletter as well too. So anyway, please share this video. I'll have more to say on this, especially C-63. It's crazy. Anyway, working hard for you. Have a great day.